Even driving past at 70, I thought you'd want to know I saw the sign nailed to the front gate. The large, black, take heed, Gothic, vaguely Germanic script proclaiming limited time, BOGO, free. I saw it and I laughed. Limited time. No shit. Then wondered if laughing's what you had in mind. I mean, if you really wanted to be funny, wouldn't you have tried a little harder? Offered something more than a bare bones, reduction of mind's ancestral soul-quaking terror of the abyss's total and unending isolation to BOGO? Couldn't you have flattered us a little, dressed up in classier garb, your crass obsession with the bottom line, as if 2 graves for the price of 1 might make being dead a deal to die for? Where will it end? What's next? A drive-through viewing for the busy mourner? Pulling up as at a Burger King or bank beside a giant window where the coffin raised on stilts is tilted toward you so you don't even have to stop completely? Why, you could even pitch it as a drive-by funeral. And here's your motto: remains to be seen, if so inclined. My friend, don't get me wrong. It's not that I'm not interested. I am. It's just that, well, there's no one in my life right now to share the extra hole with. And frankly, at my age, the odds aren't good. You could say I'm in the demographic of the funereally unattached. And as such, what I could use is a gravesite hotline. Make that a tepid or a cool line, better yet. A senior Tinder service. Call it Cinder. Smolder. Guaranteed to get the soon departed laid together in a double bed on that first and only blindest of all blind dates. Because the fact is, pal, I didn't realize how very interested I am until I passed your sign and laughing, turned by habit, half expecting her, my recent ex, to be beside me, laughing too because she would have busted a gut, that much I know. And I miss that. I miss how even at the worst of times, her laugh could, for the moment of the laugh at least, dispel the stickiest of disaffections. It would have been a gift to hear it, a gift I might have half believed you meant for me alone, given freely as I drove past, and just as freely, once past, taken back. Long before King or Selma, Dubois or Baldwin, before I'd heard of minstrel, before there were words or concepts in my mind like white flight, Jim Crow, lynch, ghetto, slavery, or riot, before anyone or anything existed beyond the family and the neighborhood, and the only Black person I knew firsthand was Melba, my mother's 60-something-year-old maid, whom my mother referred to as her girl, the only adult in my world I didn't have to call Miss or Mrs., who came by bus from nowhere to clean the house, then disappeared by bus until the next time when, I may have thought, we'd bring her back to life to clean for us again. Before there was news or history, even police, there was Amos and Andy. Like everyone, I loved the big-jawed, ever-scheming Kingfish and his shrill wife Sapphire the Blue Moon, and Mama, his shriller mother-in-law. I loved Lightning, too, the slow-as-molasses step-and-fetch-it knockoff, though back then I hadn't heard of step-and-fetch-it, and the lawyer whose name, Algonquin Calhoun, I'd say out loud because it made my parents laugh to hear me say it, though I never quite knew why, because to me, in my voice, it expressed a kind of power, status, and exotic dignity, even if Algonquin himself, as I recall, was short and thin and utterly ineffective. I even asked my parents if they would to please call me Algonquin, not Al, Algonquin Calhoun Shapiro, which of course they never did, though this too amused them greatly, so I continued asking. But what I couldn't wait to see each week was Calhoun's spare, neat office, no book anywhere in sight, and the desktop massively stark with just a black phone in one corner, an inkwell with no pen in the other, and in the middle a giant blotter so purely white against the dark wood of the desk that it embodied nothing if not total order and coherence, and thus became for me the calm eye of the hurricane of riotous mishaps, pratfalls, and entanglements that kingfish whirled across the screen each week. Last week, in a different episode, in a different kind of weather, the police on my television screen in black riot gear and standing shoulder to shoulder, perfectly still in a straight line, faced a crowd restlessly coming and going in the street, a few on bikes, but most on foot, all shouting and shaking fists or now and then hurling something while behind them a CVS is burning and a car overturned is burning too, and absurdly out of the maelstrom as if both to hold it off and to answer for it, I'm back inside that eye where all you can hear is the laugh track, while outside in living color, the windows implode into a whirlwind of screams and shattered glass as the blotter spirals off and the inkwell too, and before it vanishes, the fake phone ripped from its cradle is ringing as it goes round and round so that who's ever on the other end might hear. To him, business was all that mattered. And in business, you either gave a fucking or you took a fucking. Unfortunately, he was almost always the one who took, not the one who gave. Whereas, according to him, I was a chemist when it came to money. If I had it, I turned it into shit. The few times he had it, he invested in the stock market, and the investments mostly tanked or flatlined until he sold them. Then they rose. Still, ever hopeful, he'd explain, you have to speculate to accumulate. The only thing that grows when you hold it is your pecker. Of a man who had no taste in clothes, he'd say his collar didn't match his cuff. Of a man he didn't trust, he'd say he'd fuck a snake if he could get down low enough. When I was 12 and it was time, according to my mother, for me to know about the birds and bees, he called me into the bedroom while he was cleaning his golf shoes with a knife, digging dried mud out from between the cleats and flicking the bits and pieces onto the newspaper at his feet. Head bent over the upturned shoes, he never looked up or paused in his work. Al, he said, you're almost a man now, so keep it covered. Now get lost. When I told him I wanted to be a poet, he asked me if I was queer. One Sunday afternoon, my brother and I were roughhousing with him on the floor of the den, which we often did and loved doing, though it was frightening, which was part of the fun. How truly manic he would get, eyes crazed, mouth frothing, speaking some foreign tongue made of grunts and laughter as he threw us up and down against each other, tickling us just hard enough for us to feel what else he could do if he decided to, communicating through the play a violence way beyond the play. And from somewhere else in the house, my mother came running, thinking we were screaming in earnest, which we may have been. Get off them, she cried, get off them, and raised her hand as if to strike him, and he scrambled up from the floor so quickly she fell back against a wall, and now his hand was raised, and she was cowering, arms up like a shield in front of her face. Quietly, he said, don't ever. And the menace in the quiet said playtime was over. If he saw a white woman with a black man in public walking arm in arm, he'd say under his breath, take him home to meet your mother. Then to us he'd say, when you walk through a field of clover, you smell like clover. When you walk through a field of shit, you smell like shit. Yet on her deathbed, he begged his own daughter, whom he disowned for marrying a black man, to forgive him for his stupid bigotry. What he never thought of didn't exist until he thought of it, which he seldom did. My mother called him the most selfish man she'd ever known. He called her a frigid bitch. If anything was wrong with any of us, he'd be sick with worry, but otherwise he didn't need to see us, often didn't want to see us, and when he did see us, he couldn't wait for us to leave. Once he retired, and until he went blind, he watched CNBC all day long, following the stock prices passing in the crawl bar at the bottom of the screen. We had almost nothing to say to each other. He was short-tempered, bullheaded, anxious, unreflective, handsome, loyal, charming, utterly miserable in his marriage, but otherwise, as he would put it, A-OK, copacetic, aces.